Trustee Sherlock.
Here.
Trustee Dewart.
Here.
Trustee Markey.
Here.
Trustee Meyer.
Here.
Trustee Told.
Okay, all righty. At this point in time, we would allow anyone in the audience, hearing audience, viewing audience, up to 15 minutes for people to talk. If they have anything they wish to talk about that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone? Okay. Not hearing any. We have consideration of the minutes from the January 11th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Ms. Markey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Charlot. Any corrections, additions? All right, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Trustee Inkman.
Aye.
Trustee Sherlock.
Aye.
Trustee Dewart.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Okay, the objective of tonight's council meeting is to discuss, to have a discussion regarding some local business regulatory matters and possible central business district capital improvements, and to give a summary outline of those things and lead that. Drew, would you do that, please?
Sure will. And I'll just go through them in the order that's presented. I suspect there won't be a problem getting through all of them. The first one to talk about is considering extending an extension of the outdoor food and beverage service opportunities. During 2020, the village board, including the beginning of this year, granted regulatory relief to food and beverage establishments to allow them to provide outdoor food and beverage service. Certain restaurateurs have already approached the village about offering the same in this calendar year. I did an informal survey with a number of village managers nearby and up across the North Shore, and almost all, if not actually all of them, indicated they would be continuing outdoor service in their respective communities this year. Many others actually talked about doing it into 2022 as well. For numerous reasons. One is obviously that it's quite possible that the COVID restrictions will continue or perhaps even intensify. Customers will likely want to have options in terms of being seated somewhere else besides indoors, even though restrictions have eased up in our region. Certain restaurateurs have reported that there's a desire to even remain outside, even though when the option's available to eat and dine inside. Obviously, the outdoor activity generated a lot of public interest and community support, and hopefully will drive more economic activity. And one of the things that's been talked about is there any lost parking that in Lake Bluff's downtown that could have been caused by closing off that one portion of Scranton. I think it's obviously difficult to tell, given that all spaces have not been utilized throughout the pandemic, and it's likely that as we come out of the pandemic, that all parking will not be utilized in the same manner that it has been historically, and it'll be a slow roll back to somewhat of normalcy. So we don't anticipate any major impacts on parking by continuing the outdoor dining. And just the overall feeling that the outdoor dining has been very well received in the community, and I've received some communications from folks hoping that the village did continue this, to even consider making it a permanent fixture in the downtown. So that's come up by others. Later in tonight, there is a little note about that in the survey. We asked folks and business folks about that particular question, but at this point, staff would simply recommend that the board approve a resolution in the next 2 weeks from tonight, supporting the continuation of dining and drinking establishments having the authorization to use village streets and sidewalks throughout 2021.
Okay, let's take it piece by piece. So does anyone have any comments, questions regarding this aspect of the discussion?
The only question that I'd have on this, Drew, and I think certainly and kudos to you and your staff for being so supportive of everybody in town who's made their way through this with great difficulty. The only question I think I really have about the outdoor dining is, have we had any public safety issues arise with respect to the setup that's in front of the brewery and in front of, I think it's block 1 by the, by the green. Any public safety issues there with that setup?
No, we have not, thankfully. One of the things that we've talked about is we allowed the brewery to actually stake in their tent into the asphalt. We're going to be addressing that asphalt in the coming years even. And so we allow them to drive stakes in there so as not to rely on the barrels, which is not as a secure situation. And so they aren't concerned when like some of these pretty nasty storms we had in the last few weeks. They felt very safe and secure that those tents were not going anywhere despite the weather events. And so, but to answer your question directly, no, neither Fire Chief Graff nor Chief Hosking have reported any concerns public safety related.
Excellent.
And you
Thank
replaced
Drew.
the barriers as well. You upgraded the barriers?
We did. Yeah, there were some comments from board members going into the summer, and we indicated there was a desire to make it more permanent in nature, in the sense that the barricades were not just some wood and so forth, but we put in those jersey barriers, those concrete barriers that are of substantial size and weight and difficult to move. But those have been in place since the fall, and that certainly helps contribute to public safety in that it takes something more than your average person on a bicycle to knock over a barricade. These are of much more substance.
And we own those barricades, those concrete barriers, correct?
We do.
Okay.
We thought post-pandemic we'd have some utility for them, either at Public Works in some capacity in terms of separating materials for storage and so forth, or even reuse them or repurposing them elsewhere for other events.
That was my main concern when we had first our conversation, Drew, where the barriers were first white plastic, and you move them to concrete asphalt. That was my main concern at the time. From a dining standpoint, being European, I find what we have today absolutely wonderful, and that we continue that through 2021 I find that wonderful. Again, I think it will provide more life to the village, and life attracts life, and more people will come to celebrate our downtown. So I'm absolutely happy we do that number one on our agenda.
I also consider extending the outdoor dining an easy thing to say yes to.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Okay. All right, Drew, would you go on to item number 2?
Sure. This is a follow-up. President O'Hara and I have had conversations last year as the pandemic first started about, we had sent out our notices already for our liquor licenses. And so what ultimately happened during 2020 is that the license holders were given extra time to pay their license fees. As it worked out, they went ahead and paid them on time, and it was a non-issue. But going into this year, she and I had conversations about the possibility of the village examining whether it was a possibility that the village not require payment of those fees as part of this upcoming budget year. And we looked at the $21 and change, and she was certainly, and I don't want to speak for you, President O'Hara, but I know you were supportive of pushing this forward to have the village waive these fees for this period.
Absolutely. I think this just is a little bit added incentive to try to erase some of the hurt from last year and to try to make the most of this year, and the idea that we're in phase 4 and we can certainly increase our dining options.
And to clarify that these were just for the restaurants and drinking establishments, not the retail establishments like the grocery store or Target or something like that.
Anyone have any comments or concerns on that idea?
Great.
I'm good with it. I think it's great for our businesses.
Yeah, I think it's, I think it just helps and shows our support. I think is very important at this point. All right, sir.
Supported.
So in terms of memorializing that, we have great flexibility. We can do something as simple as your direction to me to not as part of the liquor license application round, we can just simply not include it, and I'll just follow that direction, and that's as simple as it needs to be, rather than changing any sort of, or having the board consider a resolution or an ordinance, if that's all right with you all.
If we memorialize it here in the cow, for sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Peter, you're comfortable
All
with that?
Good,
Yes?
Drew, thank you.
I'm good with it.
Okay. Okay. Included in the informational packet was a business community survey. We put this together last week with the goal of trying to get a handle on what our local business community has endured through the pandemic, talk about and get some sort of gauge on how effective the village's emergency village support activities have been, and really what we might consider doing moving forward. I've received a lot of good feedback from board members about the survey, and I think the general comments were if there was opportunities to provide respondents the ability to write in answers where if there's a multiple choice, is the place to add, other, and give them a chance to fill in a blank and add something that may be not listed or not considered by a survey to do so. I heard that from from some of you, and where we can, we will. And so that's an easy enough fix where we can. A lot of times, I think part of the problem was when you saw the survey, there was actually, like if it said other, that actually when you take the survey itself online, it actually gives you a blank if you click that. So that was unclear from what you would not have known that when you reviewed this, so I apologize for the clunkiness of that. But there's a couple other questions where that was requested, that if we can add that in a blank to give a respondent an opportunity to fill in some information that we may not have considered. So that will be done. And that was generally the comments I had received about the survey.
I like the sliders.
Good.
I liked it. I thought it was really well done, and I liked that you guys only asked one question in each statement, which is really good. I had a question on timing. When are you all thinking about sending this out? And will it be sent out by email or paper, or are you planning to get responses on it?
So the idea would
email clear.
Yeah. So we would send it out through the Chamber of Commerce, and send it to the Chamber membership, and with specific to Lake Bluff businesses, and also follow up with some telephone calls. And the goal would be to get it out this week.
Great.
And to clarify, this encompasses all the business partners in Lake Bluff.
Yes, all businesses operating in the village of Lake Bluff.
Yeah.
And all businesses are part of a Chamber of Commerce also?
I'm sorry?
Are all businesses in Lake Bluff part of a Chamber of Commerce?
No, they are not.
I mean, are we going to be, okay.
But we can put it out on our website. We can get it out different ways. But the first and primary contact will be through the chamber. They have a great connection in terms of constant contact, email addresses, better than our database, sadly, but true.
This may represent an opportunity for them to solicit and make contact with business entities that aren't part of Chamber as well. I know that they're really trying to step up membership activities right now. And this gives them something perhaps to take to a prospective member.
Yeah, and something you may or may not know about the Chamber of Commerce, Joanna Rolick, as executive director, has certainly, if she was a healthcare treatment facility, she would never turn away anybody who needed care. She has always, reached out and supported businesses, whether they were members or not, trying to show the value in the chamber membership, and I think she's been successful in that regard. So I'm sure that'll continue.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments, questions? Okay.
Okay, item number 4, which is probably the most interesting of all the items, dealing with possible modifications to the Central Business District streetscape and roadway configuration. So this year, the village has a 2-year fiscal plan. As part of this upcoming fiscal year, we had always had in our mind that we would be doing about $200,000 worth of asphalt and curb work in the central business district, mainly in the section of Scranton between Walnut and Oak. And during that process, village engineer Jeff Hansen was working with our consultant, and they looked at the opportunity that it would be possible to potentially widen Scranton and then modify the parking scenario to go from, on the north side of the street, from parallel parking to angled parking, and capture a number of parking stalls, at least 9 new ones, and added them to the public parking inventory at a considerably reduced rate to what the village has paid in the most recent past. I spoke to a lot of officials today, and many of you were not around in 2006 when the village board acquired the property off Walnut and then constructed that parking lot, which picked up 20 parking stalls. Approximately the cost to acquire the land and do the construction and design and engineering was over $700,000, which resulted in about a $35,000 per stall cost. So the marginal increase in the village's expenditure here with the planned work is very minimal to pick up additional parking stalls. Obviously, there's trade-offs involved to include the shrinking of the northern sidewalk between, again, Walnut and Oak on the north side of the street, and then most likely eliminating most, if not all, of the trees on the north side of the street. Good news, bad news is those trees, those street trees, some of them are certainly older than, something more seasoned than 5 years, but none of them are what I would consider specimens of, they're not a 50-inch white oak or anything like that. But nonetheless, some of them are slightly mature, so they would be missed. But again, the trade-off of capturing those parking stalls and the village, there's an a la carte menu, if you will, that has the base $200,000 work, and you can add on the reconfiguration work. Then you can add on adding in decorative lighting, which we can talk about, as well as decorative brick elements, and then replacing the street trees and with new planting beds, if you will, that have the same protective metal grates like we've just recently installed along Block 1, which not only protect the tree roots and so forth, but they also provide surface area for consumers and users of the sidewalk to traverse without damaging the tree, and helps maintain surface area there for programming and other activities. So I certainly can walk through all this work. I know Jeff, I'm going to ask Jeff if you could maybe walk through kind of where this is, this latest design that's in the packet. I don't know if you're prepared to share your screen at the moment. I can if you are not.
I do not have that drawing up right now.
Okay, I will bring it up. Jeff and I were busy this weekend doing a couple things, one of which was having conversations with our fire department about what was the amount of space they felt comfortable with, knowing that they may have fire apparatus that would require additional space for support stabilizers that some of these larger ladder trucks need. And also perusing some other streets in the Chicagoland area that are similarly situated here. Jeff, I don't know if you can see the screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
Would you be so kind as to walk the board through this?
Yes, so the brick areas adjacent to the curb on both sides have outlived their usefulness, and they are a maintenance headache, and they're falling apart. So we thought about how much would we have to widen the street to get angled parking, and it turns out if we just take the brick area off on the north side, we get dimensions like you see above here. That is, I think where it says it's a 13.5 foot aisle, the way we have it laid out right now, it probably would be 13 feet. but the 17.5 foot stall depth is a bit of a conservative dimension. That's a dimension that you use when there's a wall there. Doesn't allow, if your car can't overhang the curb. So IDOT standards say that you can have that 17.5 could go down to 15.3 if cars can overhang, which they can in this case, which would get us our 16-foot aisle that the fire department talked about wanting to ensure they can get the outriggers down on the truck. So I think we can make it work. Now this is, based off people with tape measures and pacing off dimensions. So if we're going to move forward, we'll have our consultant come out and take some actual measurements and make sure that we have the right dimensions on everything. And if we have to go, past the bricks on the north side plus 1 foot or plus 1.5 feet or, something like that, that'll get confirmed in that process. Because you can see as we get further east in that block, the sidewalk kind of narrows. A couple of those buildings, the North Shore building and ABC Cleaners, have little planter areas in front of the face of the building.
Hold on, Jeff, give me a chance to bring that up. Let me bring that up so everybody can see exactly what you're talking about. So this is the...
There it is. Yeah, so down by the post office, the sidewalk extends right up to the brick face of the building. A couple of these buildings, as we get further east, the sidewalk depth gets less because there's stuff coming off the front of the building, with planters and a landscape area in some cases. So as we widen the street, there's a fire hydrant by the ABC Cleaners, and all these light poles have to get moved back in proportion. So as we get further east, if we widen it too much, then we end up really squeezing the sidewalk, especially where we're looking at here, where we have the grass strip on each side. So trying to find that magic balance between providing as much aisle width as we can for driving and maintaining a good sidewalk width up by the buildings. So that would be the goal of design if we were planning on moving forward to widen the street and put the angled parking in.
And Jeff, do you want to talk about how the knuckles on how this area here?
Sure. So if you one-way the street, essentially the crosswalk will get narrower as we push the curb out to neck that down on each side. We'll create a little more public space on each end, make it a safer crosswalk there. You can see that the red lines coming out. Approximately where they would be. So we'd have more space for bike racks, benches, planters, whatever we decide we want to put in that space. But it also kind of makes it more of a less of a thoroughfare, more of, just for the businesses and people who want to park there. And we can change those crosswalks, change the sidewalk. Some of that area, you can see on the northeast corner that Drew just toggled away from. In this drawing, it just painted pavement left of where he's got that, but that could also be, the curb could extend around that and make that more of a landscape or a sidewalk.
Jeff, would you talk about the work on the south side of the street? Part of this conversation that we've had at a staff level was trying to avoid touching too much of the area, namely trying to stay off the south side of the street to avoid further disruption, but also, when I say disruption, also possibly, damaging other trees there on the south side of the street and so forth. Jeff, you want to talk about the work that would probably be done regardless if the board chooses to eliminate that decorative brick border?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we are resurfacing the street, as with all of our streets that we resurface, we do a more intensive curb replacement and sidewalk replacement. There's a lot of curb on both sides of the street here that would be replaced, probably 2/3 of it, even if we didn't widen the street. And then quite a bit of the sidewalk in front of some of the businesses on the south side is also cracked or unlevel, would be replaced. The brick area, that 30-inch wide brick strip south of the curb, will get removed and replaced with concrete, or I think the pricing that we put in the memo also would give a price to put bricks back in that area. The bricks that are there now are not full brick. They're like 1/4 of a brick thick, and that's part of the problem with them always popping off and breaking, is essentially it's not a full brick.
And Jeff, just to be clear, the $40,000 to replace the decorative brick, that's per side, yes? Or is that all in? Is it
That
20,000?
is both sides.
Both sides,
Yeah,
okay.
it's 55,000 for the brick, but it would be 15 for concrete for the sidewalk. So it's a net plus 40 if we choose to put brick back in.
Okay. And then would you talk also about the decorative street lighting?
So these streetlights, at least on the north side, if we widen, we'd have to go through the engineering exercise to see if it's better to try just to relocate the existing lights or just buy new ones. I don't know. We haven't looked at them yet to see if they're things we can move. And then we had talked about this picture here where you can see where you would put in those 20-foot wide poles, which is just a blank pole with a hook on the top.
Ooh.
And then you string those lights pole to pole. So those poles sit on a base, so it would make the most sense to do them, with everything else if we wanted to do that. As we're removing other pieces of sidewalk to put those in, those are generally spaced, at least in this situation here, about 100 feet apart. I believe as a zigzag across the street, and the lighting is just light strands with kind of a heavy-duty wire and light bulb.
This shows bollards. Does that provide any benefit, or?
I think they're a maintenance issue, especially with snow clearing. I don't think that we have issues with cars driving off the road. I mean, they do have an aesthetic reason to be there. I wasn't looking at that for this as of yet.
No, it seemed to be a maintenance issue to me, anyway.
Yeah, this picture that you're seeing is
that'd
actually.
be a friend of Public Works.
If Jeff wants to keep them, yeah. But this is Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, and their downtown district. And I was surprised by the number, given that they're dealing with just as much or more snow than we are. So the idea that they've had all these decorative lighting. If you see the other ones really have this, like, it's almost like a waving grain kind of small little cutout die cast, covering up the light and bright and illuminating the ones to draw your eye to where the crossing is. That's the purpose of that, to train your eye or teach your eye to go look where you're supposed to cross, and the others are purely decorative. But some of those had looked like they were beaten up already, and they weren't that old when I saw them this last summer. But anyway, so
Speaking of
please.
I was going to say, speaking of the tricks that your eye can be subject to, I was very interested in the end portions that would stick out into the street to create that one way, and the angled parking, that those could really be focal points for something beautiful, so that when you're looking down the street, that really catches your eye. Since we have that opportunity to make something of that, I would say that making that some kind of a really beautiful green statement, as opposed to something that's got just more impervious surface. So having something that sticks up, is green and beautiful, right? I just think that's a great opportunity for something green, perhaps something with color. But even if it were just some kind of a perennial grass or something that would just be beautiful, whether it's got just some kind of green element, I think that would be helpful in just what you see when you're looking at the streetscape. The other thing I want to go ahead.
No, please finish. I'm sorry.
And then as far as the impervious surface, if we remove some of that brickwork that's there, I understand it's more expensive to put it back, but I would think that would help in terms of just more area that water can seep into, and not increase the amount of runoff for stormwater. So although there's an increased cost, I think that that's something to consider, that it's not just an aesthetic. It has function in creating more area for that stormwater to seep. I don't know the value of that, given how many square feet, and perhaps that needs to be calculated. But then finally, looking at those buildings, you talked about how there's kind of an inconsistency, not an inconsistency where the sidewalk meets the building at the post office, and then further down there are some little pieces of green space or permanent planter boxes. Is the village property a consistent line across that north perimeter? And then, would those planter boxes be something that we could either, extend all along the street or rearrange in some fashion so that there's more of a continuous look along that north edge? Since we're kind of shaking things up and making that sidewalk smaller, it might be an opportunity to add some consistency and some beauty with straightening up that line or adding more boxes to give it a consistent look.
Jeff, are those like the existing planters that we were talking about in front of the old Spinal building and the apartment building on the far east? Those are all that's green spaces in public way, yes?
Yeah, I believe that the right-of-way line is basically the building line going down. There is a little bit of a trade-off if we widen the road, we have the trees and they possibly tree grates along the street and then the plantings up at the buildings. One or the other is going to get squished a little bit as we try to maintain, a width of a sidewalk that we need. So it's a little tricky to do, a full tree well and then also have the planting areas in front of the buildings.
Right, and perhaps there's a sort of an alternating pattern that could be, the tree on the south side, and then when the planters start, there wouldn't be a tree. It's just an opportunity to look at if village property, that right of way is being utilized. Maybe we ought to just look at it more of a global plan all along that northern side.
And we do have some set down planter boxes in front of a lot of the businesses on each side of the street. Mm-hmm. But then when you get to the ABC cleaners, they have a little set, it sounds like a concrete curb coming around the front of the building where they have bushes.
Right.
And then the North Shore building just has basically a landscape bed,
right,
5 feet wide in front of the building.
I love all the green spaces. I love all the impervious, surfaces. I'm just trying to say, is this an opportunity to maximize that or make it more visually consistent, just kind of add to the overall impact of what it is that we're doing?
I would agree, Barbara. This is actually a unique opportunity to beautify that Bluff, literally. It's a challenge, but it actually is for the better. And I think the idea behind that was we could involve, for example, the Garden Club to help us provide a consistent look or provide an interesting approach to plantings right here.
A couple of comments. I would certainly encourage a consistent treatment all the way up and down Scranton, as well as sweeping around on Center. I feel I'd like to be able to retain the trees. Third, and I don't know, Jeff, I don't understand the advantages and disadvantages of this, but I wonder the treatment that you have to be able to provide impressions of bricks into the concrete, and perhaps even to dye that might allow us to have a brick look, perhaps without quite as much expense, and maybe reduce the maintenance on that. Recognizing Barbara's point about impervious surfaces, being able to continue to maintain trees on the north side of the street would certainly provide some element of opening up that surface and allowing for drainage. And finally, the other thing take home that I had is understanding the impact, particularly to our folks who have dining, and what the impact is on them should we take this action. And Drew or Jeff, do you have any information for us on the impact of narrowing the sidewalk slightly and what it might do to, say, Innovasi, for example?
Well, I think
So
what,
the plan that we're showing
yeah.
doesn't narrow it on that side.
Uh-huh.
We would normally we do resurfacing in May and June. We would do this as a separate project, probably in the fall. Hopefully that would be less reliant on outdoor dining when we're cutting concrete and pouring asphalt out here, in September, October. So we're trying to minimize disruption that way. But again, we're trying to keep the full width of sidewalk, other than, us taking out the broken and replacing it during construction, not impacting them or not making a permanent change to that side of the street.
Uh-huh. What if someone were to want to put a sandwich shop on the north side of the street? Would there still be room for some cafe tables or something like that in this proposal?
I'll take that, Jeff.
Part of that answer depends on where, because like we talked about, as you get further east in the block, we have these little landscape bulbs that come out. If you're talking closer to the post office, I think you could certainly put cafe tables kind of where the trees are now. But it will be narrower on the north side than it is on the south side when we're done.
Yeah, Jeff, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what we've talked about doing, and maybe that's even changed because it's, when we originally talked about if there was to be additional area of the north side of the street having to be widened that would further shrink the sidewalk, I think right now, based off what you're telling me, the sidewalk would always be greater than 10 feet through the distance. Or it would have the ability to be 10 feet, whether people have planters, as we've talked about, like in front of the buildings in the far east or Greens Belt. But if some other user came in there someday and wanted to pave that to create outdoor usage space, that ultimately there could be at least 10 feet of walk throughout the entire corridor on the north, yes?
Yes, if they wanted to, in some cases, remove their landscape beds and replace it with concrete. And that is, Mark, part of what we talked about, getting into the actual design and measuring things and having the give and take between widening that aisle as much as we can without having to take as much sidewalk, and finding that, that balance point where we can keep as much sidewalk as we can, but yet make fire department comfortable.
So, but to your direct question, I did speak with restaurateur John DeRassier today, and we talked about if that sidewalk was 10 feet or so, that would be more than adequate to have a 4-top or a 2-top table to be used if in fact a restaurateur or beverage establishment wanted to go in on the north side of the street. They would still have the ability, just like they do in Block 1, where there's tree wells and so forth, to insert tables and so forth along the street edge, along the sidewalk. There'd be adequate space for that.
So if we got our pizza place back again downtown.
Don't even think about that.
That takes you back.
Yes. Drug City, USA.
No Domino.
Anyway.
Are you done? Are you done?
Yes,
there?
ma'am.
Okay.
Go for it.
I just got a couple of comments. I like the idea of added parking. Because I do hear that from a lot of folks, that there's not enough parking right there downtown. So I love that idea. And when I was looking at the drawing and having talked to Drew and now hearing Jeff, I'm looking at it from an aerial view. I think it might be nice if we on the north side did the same grates and tried to kind of have some symmetry with Block 1, the new grading and trees that we put in Block 1. I think, if I'm correct, we would still have space for that. And then that would give us a little more room on the sidewalk, because the grates are even with the sidewalk, so they create more of a more area there for if somebody did want to put a cafe table or something. I know it's a little bit more expensive, but I think the overall look would be a little more complete with the rest of Block 1. And I love the idea of the lights. I think a lot of our businesses are doing that anyway. So I think we're seeing a lot of those little strands of lights popping up all over the place. So it may actually make the downtown look a little more planned out if we actually took care of that and put the lights up ourselves, rather than having a strand of lights here and a strand of lights over here. We did something that was a little bit more planned. But yeah, I think it's interesting. I like the idea of more parking for sure.
Anybody else?
Yep, I'd be happy to weigh in a little bit here. First, thank you, Jeff, for your work on this. And I think to echo what Trustee Markey was saying, certainly addressing the need for parking downtown is greatly, greatly appreciated. So I certainly like that aspect of this and find very appealing as well in terms of the environment to be able to keep the bricks or do something perhaps as Trustee Dewart suggested, if it's possible with the concrete to make it look like bricks, the lighting, all these are great, wonderful ideas. I suppose what I might suggest or ask, Drew, however, is that that we do make sure that we reach out for some input from the neighbors, from the community, from the merchants as well in particular. Maybe a little more study in the sense that I have gotten some input that at least some merchants may be concerned about the issue that one-way streets are maybe less than ideal for retail. Not an expert, so can't speak to that. The narrowing of sidewalks certainly gives pause, but I think there's been a lot of discussion and at least good thought as to how to address that. And to echo what Trustee Dewart said, certainly if we can preserve trees, trees are something pretty essential, I think, as well for this retail environment. So I think when we come to the, to build upon the great work that's been done here already, I suppose I'd suggest some thoughts about community input and some of those issues just to make sure that particularly the merchants are being heard as to these factors that may affect their business. So thank you.
We have an opportunity right now to make some enhancements that not only I think will beautify the downtown or uptown, because that's what it was always known in the past, the uptown area back in the camp meeting days, but to really support the rejuvenation of our downtown food and drink establishments, which have really had a hard year. And I think would also attract more people to our community. You have to understand that the parking configurations that we have in that area have not been changed since 1930. Go back and if you look at some of the old photographs we have, it's the exact same parking configuration. So I think we have an opportunity to add more parking, to make it a lot more attractive also for pedestrians and for outside dining and just the whole ambiance. Also, especially since I look out my front windows on the north side of Scranton, I would really emphatically say we do need to replace the trees. I think we are a tree city, USA, and I think any tree that we take out, if we can replace them, we need to do so. And that also would add balance and symmetry to both sides of the streets. But we have an opportunity to talk to our merchants, and I know Drew has started to do that and to talk to see what making that a one-way street, what that might have on that. Having lived in the downtown for 50 years, I don't think it's going to have a great impact. We have very little retail. I'm even trying to think what retail we have in our downtown at the moment. We have, and I think we will see more opportunities for food and drink. And how do we enable those businesses to thrive, I think is really important for us. So I'm excited about looking forward to how this is all going to work out.
Yeah, I think if we go back in the Wayback Machine about 18 months and remember what parking was like with the very active restaurant activity that we had on a Thursday or a Friday or a Saturday night, people were parking a pretty good distance and walking a couple of blocks to get to one of the core downtown restaurants there. And I think the additional parking spots would certainly be a benefit to our downtown establishments. And I'll just use that as a word so we don't get caught up in whether we're food, beverage, or service, what have you.
I would like to support also the statement and the statement from Trustee Markey. I think that I really like the idea of lights, making the downtown, that street very welcoming to people coming to use our restaurants and other establishments. I love this idea. I mean, we have to do everything we can to be supportive of the businesses that are in the CBD. And I think this is very important. I think this is very essential to our support.
Well, I will tell you, some of us have been talking about putting lights downtown for years. So I'm excited about this whole idea. And I know there'll be other people in town that will look very favorably, certainly on the lights. The thing. We always talked about at the holiday time to do that, but to have this all year round and make this area a little more magical, I think will be great.
I love it.
I think the lights do provide a little safety, especially when we're doing block parties and Bluffania and things that go into the night where it gets quite dark. It can get quite dark up in town, even with the street lights. And not so much for all of us, but for folks that have little kids. I think having lights kind of strung around and a little more light in that area would be great for those events. I think there is a safety factor there.
A good point.
Yeah.
Does that conclude your summary, Drew?
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about reaching out to the local businesses to gauge their take their pulse on the one-way street aspect. I'll tell you, from a staff level, we've talked about it for last couple of weeks, looking at one of our immediate worries were if it was to be made one way, what does that impact have on the neighboring residential areas, right? And one of the, I guess, fortunate circumstances is Oak Avenue at this intersection here at the far east side of this proposed improvement area is one way, and it's only southbound. So individuals driving down the street, say for some reason it's a busy Friday night, there's no parking even in this added parking zone here. So what do they do when they get to Oak Avenue in terms of trying to make another movement to come back, circle around and see what other parking is available? They would turn down Oak Avenue where there's other public parking. It's sending them in the right direction, right? Correct? In the right clockwise motion around our central business district to loop back through to see what other parking is available, but it's not sending them north into the North Avenue corridor. It's pushing them down through this where the library is, where the back end of Block 4 is. It's been pushing them around the condos and back in front of Village Hall where they're supposed to be in terms of the right. It's pushing them in the right direction.
Right. I don't, again, having lived down here for 50 years, I don't think that it will really affect places like North Ave or anything else, Drew, because exactly what you said, that's the route people would go by. And we frankly do not have a huge amount of, overall traffic. We're not going to see huge amounts of overload on that. I don't see too many downsides, to the one-way parking because we really could use, I think, the additional space. As I will have to tell you, we haven't changed this since 1930. So it's really good that we are looking at a whole new way of using our area in the downtown. How do we use it? And we are using it in a way that we're taking over it with businesses and with outside dining and with people walking around. And really, that's what we want. And I think this will add to that.
Jeff, I have a question for you that just based off a couple comments that I've heard about using brick for some level of less impervious surface than concrete. Tell me, would these bricks be placed like in a concrete bed? So there would be no benefit to having that? I ask because I don't know what you would spec out there, just curiosity.
It would not be impervious. I can't tell you offhand. It probably wouldn't be in a concrete bed. It would be in a sand bed. But the soils in this area don't take a lot of water anyway. So it would, I wouldn't expect it to provide a permeability unless you spec a permeable paver. But again, they really don't expect a lot of water to go into the ground here either way. And if you do spec something that is supposed to be permeable, you're going to have to put an under drain in it that will increase the cost.
Yeah.
I had a question about those two drives on the east. There are two cut-ins to where the illustrated carved angled spots are, right? Are both of those private drives? It's not, those driveways are not owned by the village or, in control of the village, is that correct?
That's correct.
Private drive. There are private drives.
Okay. And so that one parallel spot would just sit there, the one that's in between the two?
We'd probably leave it as a parallel spot, yeah. If there was a way to close one of those driveways, it would pick up a bunch more parking spaces, but I don't think there is.
I can hear the squeals now.
Well, I'm just trying to think about, maximizing what we got here.
There we go. Lateral thinking. Lateral thinking.
Well, and is it really just that if you drive in that driveway going north, it's a big U, and that's all you can do? I don't know what's behind the building there.
No, it's all one way. You go in, and the parking is sometimes behind the building too.
Mm-hmm.
But there is not. None of those driveways has an exit through another driveway.
Got it.
There was a question. I don't know if everybody can see this question on the screen. No, you cannot. I'll read it. Question/comment. It's from Mickey Collins. It says, I suggest that more consideration should be given to changing Scranton to one way. There will be a traffic pattern changes, possibly sending vehicles to North Avenue. Also, one-way streets have proven to be detrimental to retail. Many towns are changing their one-way streets back to two-way to invigorate their retail.
I was thinking about that, and in 25 years of driving through the village, that's a two-way street. Honestly, I think 95% of the time that I would be going down that street, I would be traveling from west to east. It was a very rare occasion where I found a spot going the other way, and I, did a 3-point turn somewhere further down Scranton Avenue to grab it. But just the natural flow of traffic is one way from what I've seen over the years.
I have a comment about that very specific aspect of a one-way. That was actually a very, very big point of discussion in Europe about 10 years ago, where towns would, the point was downtown would die, okay? Cars would be in and people would come downtown with a car, pick exactly what they want and just leave that space without concern for the other businesses around. And what people did was they either removed streets, no more traffic, no more car traffic, or they established a pattern of one-ways for cars. And what people noticed, or what people said was, we are just going to die. The downtown is going to dry up, and people will leave downtown, and the businesses will leave. And what happened was, people started to park on the periphery of the downtown or drive through those one-ways and walk. And then people turned to lights, as we have on this proposal, and people started to stay downtown for going to stores, going to restaurants, actually spend a lot more time, and you had the effect was a complete revitalization of downtowns. And that's the last 20, 25 years. And that pattern has become very acute in the last 10 years, where people are really driving people to walk. And the last time I went back home, last summer, even though it was a pandemic, people were outside wearing masks, but still there was an effect of people were staying and walking and parking cars and being there.
No, I think the question also has arisen when we talk about one-way streets and how that sometimes may imperil retail. I think the question needs to be thought about is what is the future, or what has been the future of retail in the Lake Bluff downtown. And I've lived here, as I said, since 1969. And the retail has come and gone, and nothing has ever really lasted. What we have, we are very, very small for that. People do not come for retail. It doesn't last. So we need to really think about that as you go on. We have a bike shop, but now half of that is food and drink. You know, there's very other retail that I'm trying to think that exists on its own. Lawrence Interiors has some retail, but most of it is their interior design and their framing and that type of thing. There's very little, if you look at and scan your downtown, retail that has survived over the years. What we seem to have, gold mine for us seems to be, take away the COVID, is food and drink. People love it. They love the idea that they can sit outside, or they can walk around, and they can stroll, and they can do this, and you know, have buffinia and all of that. That seems to resonate with the community, and people come from outside for that. But I think you need to think really seriously if you're going to base the future on retail in Lake Bluff's downtown, because I don't see it.
Yeah. Well, I think that then begs a question that I'd ask Drew or anybody else who has the knowledge, which is, what is the conventional wisdom? And I don't know the answer to this question as to the effect of one-way streets on restaurants and services, food and drink, those kind of establishments. You know, I'm not an advocate for one-way or two-way. I'm an advocate for what is going to be best for our future. So I'd ask that question: what is the conventional wisdom on one-way vis-a-vis what we are seeing today as the future of Lake Bluff?
I just see the opportunity to provide more parking for people to patronize what we have.
Right.
That if there was an impact on retail, which we really don't have, that might be different. But the real opportunity here is how can we increase the opportunity for more people to patronize and come in and sit down. Retail is quick in, quick out, or quicker in, quicker out, I think, than going to an Innovasi or a Mavry's or the brewery or something like that. And I think that dynamic probably has a significant impact, Bill, on how we think about the parking patterns.
Yeah. Well, if one way is better for restaurants, then that merits the most serious of consideration.
And, you know, I don't know that it's not one way per se as much as it is providing the opportunity for what one way provides to us.
Right.
Which is an extra population of parking.
Yeah, and that 9 extra, I mean, we've really come full circle. 9 extra parking spaces is gold.
Oh my gosh, that's another 18 to, you know, probably 6 to, well, if 9, it's probably 4 to 8 tables in restaurants. That's huge.
And that is huge for our little downtown and our restaurants. It is huge. 9 places, frankly, are huge for us.
Well, if that outweighs any disadvantages to dying retail, then that merits very serious consideration, despite the counterpoints about one way.
Yeah.
So, since time is drawing near,
retail since, yeah.
Okay. Okay, folks. Has everyone weighed in right now? I see we're heading up to the hour here. Anyone else?
Madam President, if I may, just quickly, Madam President, if I may, really quickly. Jeff, do you have enough direction to keep moving forward because I think the idea was if there was general consensus around moving forward with this, and it sounds like there is, and maybe the next step, the 2 things, or actually 3 things that we can do is I can socialize this amongst the downtown merchants and property owners and get any additional feedback. And then Jeff can also drill down to the next level for the next level of engineering. I don't know what you would call that, Jeff, other than the next level of engineering.
I will start doing measuring some light surveying. Just get a consultant on board to try to get us so we can make decision points on geometry.
Yeah, and find out more directly about some of these impacts. But at the same time, was the board comfortable with sending this to the ABR to get their feedback on maybe some of these other areas for possible amenities, and including the lights and maybe some of the other corner locations for improvements in terms of landscaping, et cetera?
Yes.
Their creative input.
Yes, very much so.
Very good.
All right, all right. Anything
I
else?
can just think of one more thing. Is
ma'am.
there input from the Sustainability and Enhancement Committee that might be solicited?
We can touch bases with both.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, it's a good idea. All right,
Drew.
anything else?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Ms. Ankerman. Roll call, please.
Trustee Sherlock.
Aye.
Trustee Dewart.
Aye.
Trustee Markey.
Aye.
Trustee Meyer.
Aye.
Trustee Ankman.
Aye.
Do we have a separate Zoom for the regular board meeting?
No, ma'am. We stay in the same meeting.
Bless your little heart. Thank you.